What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another video on the Big Blue in the Bronx YouTube channel. Hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or video drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Share this out. Do all the good stuff. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Also, check out our Patreon. We have a couple of new things on there. Early access to videos, sports articles, a lot more coming for you guys. It's going to be a great ride this year. We're hoping to get to 2K subscribers fairly soon, and you guys can help doing that by sharing out, subscribing, do all the good stuff. So, the Wink drama is over, and the New York Giants hopefully are beginning their search for a defensive coordinator. And in this video, I'm going to list 5 defensive coordinators the New York Giants should pursue. With that on the table, I will be taking out names like Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel. I assume that both of those guys will be pursuing head coaching opportunities. And I think it would be a little bit of a demotion if both of those guys came in to interview for the New York Giants defensive coordinator jobs. Mike Vrabel has never ran a defense, to my knowledge. Actually, he may have been the defensive coordinator in 2017 with Houston, or it was either the linebacker coach. But so you have Vrabel probably going to pursue head coaching opportunity, and Belichick, who's also older, so I don't know that he would really work under Dable. But nonetheless, 5 defensive coordinators for the New York Giants in which they should pursue. The first one is a name that really has not been tossed around, and I think it needs to get a little bit more recognition. Now, I will say 2 of these guys on the list are lateral moves. In other words, their head coach just got fired or has been fired for a few weeks now, and there is a chance that their organization may block them from getting interviews elsewhere for the same position. I don't think they could block them from head coaching interviews, though. But nonetheless, the Giants are not looking for a head coach. Why I mention that is the first guy's name is Ryan Nielsen. Who is Ryan Nielsen? Ryan Nielsen was the defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons this past year. He was also the defensive line coach. And he was also the co-defensive coordinator back in New Orleans in the first year under Dennis Allen as the head coach. He's 44 years old. He's actually a former player, but didn't really get much NFL experience. But nonetheless, let's talk about some of the rankings, some of the other stuff that comes with Mr. Ryan Nielsen. And shout outs to my guy, Savion Mixon, who actually did a good job of filling me in on what his system is about. But nonetheless, let's go to the stats, shall we? So, with the New Orleans Saints, again, co-defensive coordinator with Chris Richard, so it's kind of like a shared thing. Plus, Dennis Allen was calling the plays, but we're going to mention it because he still had something to do with it. 5th in total yards per game. This is 2022, by the way. 2nd against the pass, 24th against the run, 9th in points per game, 27th in blitz percentage, 29th in pressure percentage and sacks, 31st in turnover differential, 30th in interceptions, and 27th in forced fumbles. Pro Bowlers got Demario Davis and Cam Jordan, both of which were Pro Bowlers before the 2022 season, but it's good to keep that thing going right there. Or else you're a bad coach if those guys are Pro Bowlers. Nonetheless, you move to 2023 with the Atlanta Falcons, where he gets his own thing. Dean Pease retires. He takes over all the good stuff. And they were a pretty good defense for most of the 2023 season. 11th in total yards, 8th against the pass, 20th versus the run, which is a little concerning. 18th in points per game, 17th in blitz percentage, 10th in pressure percentage, 21st in sacks, 30th in turnover differential, 27th in INTs, and forced fumbles 23rd. Now, let's go to what a friend of mine had to say. A lot of split safety looks, but mostly because they didn't have the horses on the front to be aggressive, as he was in New Orleans. They played a lot of quarters coverage because they did have Jesse Bates, and they also needed to help out Richie Grant. He was good enough to run both man and zone coverage. The guy I was speaking to was really impressed with the way he molded the Falcons defense, played with the talents, allowing Jesse Bates to play free, allowed Troy Anderson to play loose and develop, had the defensive line and linebackers in unison against the run. Quote unquote, it was beautiful to watch. And let's take a look at that Falcons defense, right? 2023 ranked as one of the top defenses in the league. And you could tell, like, there was not a lot of talent on this team. And it's very surprising that they were at least as solid or as good as they were. Calais Campbell, that's a name for the defensive line. Other than that, I mean, you're not really looking at some key names. Grady Jarrett was there too. I think he ended the season on IR though, so there's a point to be made about that. Clark Phillips, that's a name out of Utah. DeMarco Helms, safety from Bama. Richie Grant. Jesse Bates is obviously the best name you got on there right now because he was a Pro Bowler with the Cincinnati Bengals, and that was the big signing. And then you look at the linebacker room, and he runs a 3-4 system. The linebacker room is just full of below-average talent, in my opinion. I mean, Bud Dupree, who's really toned down since the injury he had a couple of years ago. Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State. D'Angelo Malone, who they drafted in 22 out of Western Kentucky. Nate Landman had over 100 tackles this year, along with Caden Ellis, so that's good. That's inside linebacker for you. And then also, a name we should know, Lorenzo Carter. So he really did a lot with nothing. Now, obviously, there's that question how he's going to do with better talent, but also there is the question, does he get blocked? The Giants already got blocked from interviewing Dwayne Ledford, who was the offensive line coach for the Falcons, and he had a pretty good unit. But Ryan Nielsen is your number one candidate. And, of course, these are not in order. I'm just throwing 5 at you. But the next defensive coordinator candidate is a name you guys should all know, and that is Leslie Frazier. Frazier is an older gentleman, 64 years old. Obviously was the defensive coordinator from 2017 to 2022 for the Buffalo Bills. And I'll go off the last 2 years. I'll make it fair. He obviously was in the studio in 2023 with NFL Network, and he runs a 4-3 system. But let's take a look at 2022. Actually, no, let's go back to 2021. In 2021, they were actually a pretty solid unit. And I mean solid, I should be saying great. First in the rankings of pass defense, total yards, and points per game, and 13th against the run. 11th in blitz percentage, 1st in pressure percentage, 11th in sacks, 7th in turnover differential, 3rd in interceptions, and 6th in forced fumbles. This is pretty much what his defense looked like most of the time in Buffalo. When they got that solid talent, I would say probably around 2019, 2020, that's when that defense really started clicking and was an elite defense in the league. And all pros, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer for that year. Now you move to 2022, where it kind of took a step back, but it was still a really good defense. 3rd in total yards, 15th against the pass, 5th against the run, 2nd in points per game, 23rd in blitz percentage, 14th in sacks and pressure percentage, 15th in turnover differential, 4th in INTs, and 10th in forced fumbles. Pro Bowlers Matt Milano and Jordan Poyer. And of course, you have to mention he's playing with talent like Tre'Davious White. We mentioned Micah Hyde. We mentioned Jordan Poyer. We mentioned, a couple other guys. Greg Rousseau, right? Ed Oliver is another name. Not Terrell Edmonds, but Tremaine Edmonds was still there when he was in his last year, 2022, with the Buffalo Bills. So he was playing with some pretty good talent. Now, cornerbacks outside of Mr. Tre'Davious White, I mean, that's a little bit in question. But nonetheless, very good defensive coordinator. Obviously, he was a former head coach. I don't know if they're going to have a problem with him connecting to the young players. He runs more of a zone system. He runs a 4-3, so the Giants would have to transition back to a 4-3, kind of like what they did with Steve Spagnuolo. And he has the Brian Daboll connection. Both those guys were in Buffalo, and you could tell based off of the tension that was going on with Wink and Brian Daboll, he is a more relaxed guy in terms of what he wants the defensive game plan to be. And Leslie Frazier and pretty much all these guys that we're going to go through are pretty relaxed in their defensive game plan, not really too aggressive. But that's Leslie Frazier for you. And I will say this, right, before we move on to the next candidate, these candidates, other than the next guy, don't really have something consistently that Leslie Frazier had. And it's one of the problems that the Giants have been trying to really solve over the last few years. Run defense. I mean, 2021, they were 13th and then 5th in 22. In 23, it's pointless to look at because he wasn't the head of that defense. It was really more of Sean McDermott's thing. But, I mean, listen, if the Giants are trying to solve run defense a little bit more and just leave the pass defense, Leslie Frazier's your guy, especially if you want to be in a zone system and a little less aggressive. So we move on to the next guy, and he is a former Giant himself. I think you guys know that name. That's Antonio Pierce. And Pierce took over as the interim head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I'm not going into his whole statistics when he was at Arizona State with Herm Edwards, because that was a couple of years ago, and him being the defensive coordinator there, he does have a Giant connection, not just being a player. DJ Davidson played under him when he was the defensive coordinator. It's good to mark that, but that was a couple of years ago, so you want to really get the gist of the NFL level. Now, guaranteed, right, Patrick Graham was calling the defense. But we know Antonio Pierce, through those 9 games, was a huge leader of men. He was handpicked by the Raiders locker room as the successor to Josh McDaniels. It wasn't Patrick Graham. It wasn't that guy they had, the offensive coordinator who worked with Adam Gase. It wasn't the special teams coach. It wasn't this guy. It was Antonio Pierce, because the whole entire locker room saw him as a leader of men. So you kind of need that coming after Wink, not just a guy who's going to sit there and call plays. So that's something that Antonio Pierce has that some of these other guys may not have bragging rights about. But of course, interim head coach, 5-4 record down the stretch, and they had some pretty good defensive stats since Antonio Pierce took over. Total yards per game, 324.8. Allowed 226 yards per game in the pass. In terms of the running game, now I don't have rankings except for one, unfortunately, but 98 yards per game on the ground allowed. That's not bad. 16 points per game. That was first in the NFL since week 9. 15 turnovers, 7 INTs, 8 fumbles. Also some other stuff. 11 touchdowns allowed in those 9 games. That's really good. That's 1 point something touchdowns a game. And 30 sacks in 9 games. They had 16 to start the year. They had 46 to end the year. 30 sacks. Max Crosby, the development of Tyree Wilson, some of these other guys, they developed under Patrick Graham, but the head coach, or I should say interim head coach, was Antonio Pierce. So, yes, he's never ran an NFL defense, but you know what? Give him an interview. I know, yes, it's kind of a demotion, and I don't know how the Raiders are going to see things with blocking guys. I don't know if they could actually block Pierce because he's actually interviewing for the Titans job. But, hey, listen, if he wants to interview a defensive coordinator and doesn't get a job elsewhere as a head coach, bring him in. He's a leader of men. He's respected. And, just take a chance on that because I think the reward is pretty high. So, move on to the next guy, and this is what I was talking about with the lateral moves. It might be getting blocked. He's been blocked by not him, but the team that was interviewing him or wanted to interview him was already blocked by the organization. That was the Carolina Panthers, and that was Ejiro Evero. Now, Ejiro Evero, he's a pretty young guy. 43 years old. He's been the defensive coordinator twice for 2 teams within the last 2 years. We could go to Denver first, why not? And this was the year that they had Nathaniel Hackett as the head coach, and that team was horrible, right? He was fired mid-season, all these other different things coming around, but the defense was really good, and he was actually succeeding with some subpar talent on the defensive side of the football. Now, of course, he did have Justin Simmons, who made the Pro Bowl under him, and thanks to him as well, he got Pat Surtain his first NFL Pro Bowl. But 2022 with Denver, some pretty good stats considering the talent once again. 7th in total yards, 12th against the pass, 10th against the run, 14th in points per game, 4th in blitz percentage, but pressure percentage 26th and 24th in sacks. So again, that kind of goes with the talent. You look at the linebackers and the edge help. DJ Jones, run defender from the 49ers. Mike Purcell, veteran defensive lineman. As far as the linebackers go, not a lot of guys. Jonathan Cooper, a rookie, and Nick Benito from, I believe it was Oklahoma. And, not to mention, I believe this was the season they traded Bradley Chubb. So, not a lot of help. You really can't blame them for this defense really putting up some poor stats in that area of sacks, pressures, quarterback hits, all that stuff. But defensively, Turnover differential, 17th. That's not bad considering how much they turned over the football on offense. 22nd in forced fumbles and 10th in INTs. Now you move over to the Carolina tenure. Of course, they fired Frank Reich midseason, and this was a solid hire once again. 4th in total yards per game, 3rd against the pass, 23rd against the run, 29th in points per game. Blitz percentage 13th, pressure percentage 30th, 32nd in sacks, 32nd in forced fumbles, 28th in INTs, and 25th in turnover differential, which turnover differential, if you don't know the stat already, it could kind of intertwine with offense because it depends on how much the quarterback of the offense really goes out there and turns the ball over. My guy PNP, he does a podcast for the Panthers. I asked him, okay, what's Ejiro Evero's scheme like? What was it like in Carolina? He goes, well, he probably will be blocked for another defensive coordinator job, but he did a fantastic job considering all the injuries and limited talent. 3-4 base, lots of zone, and you really need solid corners. So let's take a look at who they had. Obviously, Dante Jackson, Frankie Louvu's been solid for them at the inside linebacking core, so you have that. I'm just going to pull it up real quick. Brian Burns is another guy they had on that defense, and he was pretty much the main sack leader, the main ringleader there. Derek Brown, not a ton of defensive talent, but he made it work. Jeremy Chin as well. I know that there was some stuff out there about him not being utilized properly or some sort of stuff towards the end of the year to where he had disgruntled feelings towards the way he was being used or the way the Panthers organization was treating him, whatever. But Evero, he's got a solid record. Again, it's going to really tune down to if he is blocked. Now, I don't know how the situation is going to be. I don't think the Giants are going to wait too long to hire a defensive coordinator, depending on the circumstances, because let's just say the Panthers go out and hire Joe Schmo, right? Joe Schmo now has a chance to interview different guys for defensive coordinator. That's an extended process that I don't know if the New York Giants really want to take. So, candidate number 4, again, not in order, Ejiro Evero. And the last guy is a guy we should all know, and I've said that a lot, but Jerome Henderson. Now, everyone was talking about Jason Simmons, the defensive backs coach over in Las Vegas. But I'm like, wait a minute. We have our own defensive backs coach that's really done a nice job, and that's Jerome Henderson. Just some background, he's never been a defensive coordinator. Obviously was hired under the Joe Judge staff in 2020 as a defensive backs coach, and also has some front office experience. But let's talk about where the pass defense ranked. He was the DB coach the last 4 years, and not just cornerbacks, but safeties. 17th in 2020, 15th in 2021, 14th in 22, and 2023-19. So they never really went into the low of lows, but they never really went into the high of highs. Now, 2020, you look at a couple of different things. James Bradbury had a Pro Bowl season. Go to his stats, right? 2020, completion percentage is 61.5, 4 touchdowns allowed, 3 interceptions, 81.2 passer rating. So you have his Pro Bowl year. Isaac Yiadom, I mean, he wasn't perfect, but he played solid in a zone system and was developed because of Jerome Henderson and Patrick Graham. 120.6 passer rating, that's not good, but 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, 61.7 completion percentage. Again, zone. If he was in man coverage, he would have been a little bit more shit. Now, you look at this guy, and you could look at him for all the 4 years he's been here. Darnay Holmes, right? We complain about him a lot because he doesn't fit the man scheme system, but he's been solid in his Giants career. Now, not that I would re-sign him. He might get re-signed if the Giants have a defensive coordinator that runs zone, but he's only allowed 1 touchdown in his NFL career. 64.6 passer rating this year, 75% completion. He had 2 interceptions this year, one against the Cowboys. I can't remember where the other interception came from. 2022, allowed his first touchdown, 85.1 passer rating, total of 61.2 completion percentage, had an interception in 21 and 20, and overall solid years. Again, it's not like he was horrible in the slot. Again, most of the time he was in a zone fit, but at the same time, the penalties kind of caught up and bit him in the ass. But again, the positive side you can attribute to Patrick Graham and Jerome Henderson. Now, there's going to be a few more guys, and we'll end the video because I want to really catch the significance, and you really have to dive deeper for a guy who's not been a defensive coordinator. Dory Jackson, 2021, 52.1 completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, and an INT. He had an INT this year, 2 touchdowns, 95.5 passer rating. And in 2022, for Mr. Adoree Jackson, 83.9 passer rating, 2 touchdowns. So not, a high count of touchdowns that he has allowed. Now, he's not a huge ball hawk, Mr. Adoree Jackson, but better than what he was in Tennessee. Because if you look at 2020 in Tennessee, he gave up 3 touchdowns, a passer rating of 145.8. A lot of Giant fans didn't want him. But he came over, he played solid, but, I don't know if it's going to be good enough for the New York Giants to re-sign him. One guy I look at is Jerome Williams. Now, he was an undrafted free agent out of Albany, but started some games due to the injuries to the corner core in 2021. 38.1 completion percentage, 46.3 passer rating, 53 yards allowed on 8 completions. That's not bad at all in the time he played. I attributed that once again to Jerome Henderson. We got a few more. I know there's a lot. Fabian Moreau, in the year he played with the Giants, 100.5 passer rating, not great, but 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He played a solid corner 2 and sometimes corner 1 because Adoree Jackson was out to that punt return shit in the zone system that Wink was running because they didn't have the personnel. And sometimes man 2, but 59.3 completion percentage. Cordell Flott, right? He's trying to develop for the man system. I don't know if he's going to be out next year due to the fact that there's a high probability the Giants will hire a manned-up defensive coordinator. And better yet, we assume that the Giants are going to hire a zone defensive coordinator, but what if Jerome Henderson is hired and he wants to run a man system? That's a question to be asked. Cordell Flott got his first interception this year, and he was unplayable in his rookie year, got better as an outside corner, and then in 23, he did allow 3 touchdowns, got his first interception, 94.2 passer rating, 59.6 completion percentage. He improved. Now, the problem with him, he doesn't understand zone coverage. That's a whole separate entity. But hey, listen, you know what? Credit to him. Nick McLeod, he's one of the guys I preach about, right? I think the Giants should end up re-signing him. I think he's an exclusive rights free agent. But as far as he goes, Mr. Nick McLeod, solid corner 2, not great, not all pro level, not terrible. Solid corner 2 in 22 when the Giants had those injuries. 3 touchdowns allowed, 92.8 passer rating, 54.2 completion percentage. The completion percentage went up in 2023, 60.9, 1 touchdown allowed, and that was in the final game, and 72.4 passer rating. But he is a solid special teamer, and he's also a solid backup corner, slot and outside. And once again, who can you thank? You can thank Wink, you can thank Joe Shane, but you gotta thank Jerome Henderson. I'll go to the 3 safeties, and that's it. Right, I know I've been giving you guys a lot of information. Xavier McKinney, he's been here since Jerome Henderson has been here. He was part of his development in his rookie year when he started off a little slow because of the leg injury. And then 2021, when he had 5 INTs, he was a part of that, and so was Patrick Graham. He gave up 3 touchdowns, but he also had 5 interceptions, 72.2 passer rating. Now, last year, obviously, 2022 wasn't like the best season for McKinney because you didn't really see a lot of ball impact. 52.2% completion, 1 touchdown allowed, 93.6 passer rating. And also 2023, he did get 3 interceptions within the last few games, 1 touchdown, giving up 69.8 passer rating and a 63.1 completion percentage. Now let's go to Dane Belton, who I personally think is a better deep safety than box, but he can also play the box. 1 sack, 2 quarterback pressures, 33 tackles, 70% completion. He's got 4 interceptions already in his NFL career. And that's being placed in the defense, limited snaps, limited time on the field, which, again, pretty interesting. 84.6 passer rating this year, 2 touchdowns allowed, 65.5 passer rating the prior year. I really like the way Dane Belton is developing. Again, I think he's better as a deep safety, but again, that's another attribution to Jerome Henderson's way of developing players and DBs. The last one I'll go with is Jason Pinnock, who was claimed off waivers like Nick McLeod was, who turned into a solid starting safety in 22. The stats are a little bit worse in the passer rating. 1 touchdown allowed, 141.1 passer rating, 78.6% completion. But he got better in 2023 with more games. He got 2 interceptions, took 1 back to the house against Miami. 54.8% completion, 313 yards, 74.8 passer rating, and 2 touchdowns. Jets wanted him as a corner. He turned into a safety, and I think that's worked out. But those are 5 defensive coordinators that the New York Giants should pursue. Like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops video drops. Appreciate it coming back. Definitely use the SeatGeek code. $20 off. Big Blue in the Bronx. And check out our Patreon. Articles, behind the scenes stuff, and a lot more. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon.